Everyone, Andy Moses. Grew up in LA, then moved to New York when I was 20 for about 20 years, and then I moved back 20 years ago. So I lived my life so far in equal thirds. This painting is from 2014, the surfboard's from 2013. When I moved back to LA in the early 2000s, I actually had a little shack on the beach in Malibu. And I grew up really walking to the edge of the cliff where I grew up and watching the sunset, watching the water, watching those days where ocean and sky become kind of one elemental thing. It was really a big influence, but more probably in the back of my psyche, because I went and made work in New York for 20 years. And it was when I came back, had my little shack in Malibu by the beach, it was painting in Venice. I would drive back and forth every day on PCH, and just seeing that, not only the infinite space when you look out towards the horizon, the ocean, but the ambient light in Southern California. To me, there's nothing like it. And I think I appreciated it growing up, but I appreciated it even more after my return from New York, where you don't see, it's dark a lot, so you don't see that infinite vista. And I wanted to make work that really kind of related to my new environment. So I started curving the canvases, and I started working with just one kind of pearlescent white paint and making these pours across that looked like horizons. They were very abstract, they were very minimal, but you could kind of see a horizon line and it felt like you were being drawn into this deep space. I started making them convex at the beginning, so they curved outward. But as soon as I made the first concave one, I think it was in 2003, I knew that was my trajectory. And I continued to make them. Every year, I would sort of move into new colors that I hadn't worked with before, into new kind of compositional things. And eventually, by about 2008, they started becoming more complex. I started finding ways of applying the paint. I've been working with sort of pouring paint, actually going back to even the early 80s. But this new way of doing it, I started when I moved back from New York. And it just became more complex, and I could get more detail, more line, more suggestion of space, and suggesting spaces that were either oceanic or desert-like. But I grew up around abstract painting, so I always wanted to make something that referred to that history of abstraction as well. So for me, it's almost like a Rorschach test. You look at it, it's this abstract painting, but it suggests all these elements in nature too. And I think you can bring your own kind of backstory to it, whatever you've seen growing up. I've had people say, oh, I grew up in the desert and it looks just like this, or I was in an airplane and it looked just like this, or was on the ocean on the East Coast and it looked just like this. So I like that element. I want you to be able to kind of get lost into this infinite space. And then still have it refer again back to, I'm making these gestural lines that refer to the history of abstract painting. This is a surfboard I actually made in 2013 for Venice Family Clinic fundraiser. This surfer I knew donated all these boards, and we painted on top of them. And it was kind of interesting because the slight bend here, the paint would flow and create these really interesting kind of spaces in it. It looks very three-dimensional. So I love the way it turned out. I think I've only made 2 boards. That's probably all I'll make, because I do like working either on, I work a lot in this kind of square format and also these long horizontals. And then in about 2015, I started curving the paintings top to bottom vertical. And I've also made a lot of other shapes as well, circular ones, hexagonal ones. But again, it always comes back to making something that hopefully takes you on a journey into a metaphysical realm. And again, refers to the history of abstract painting as well.
I'm Guy, and Billie got this work from, I don't know exactly where you got this from.
I think I actually got it at auction. But, you know, I wanted to mention the thing that I was so impressed with, going over to your studio, your cardboard models, you know, you're making your pieces into the cardboard models. And I was just at the Picasso cutout show, and some of the pieces were in cardboard, and it reminded me of that. But I think I do have, as sculptures, some of the cardboard pieces too. So
You do, yes.
yeah,
That's-
I got them from you.
Yeah, which is really, really great, because I work in cardboard first, and they're very accurate models. So like if I was going to build this, I'll build it in cardboard first. So the only difference, there's no difference in form. It would look exactly like this. And you know, I was really happy that Weisman, you chose to have that piece in the collection, because you know there's a history of cardboard and paper, and I did a show. It was at the Bobby Greenfield Gallery. It was Frank Gehry's cardboard, Bob Rauschenberg's cardboard, and my cardboard. And
I was there, that was good.
you remember that show? Yeah, it was really fun to do, but it's just another medium. And the great thing about cardboard is very fleshy, it's very friendly, and it's really easy to manipulate. The forms that I do, you know, I had someone in the studio today, and they wanted to know a background, and talking about the background is difficult. Pictures are easy, I can show you through them. And since today we don't have a moderator, we don't have pictures, but there is the real thing. Basically, you know, I could go on and tell you about it, and there will be questions afterward. So think of a question for me, okay? And if you don't have a question, I can outwait you. I was a teacher, so but if you could do that, it would help me, because I could go off in a million different directions. They could be boring to most of you. So I'm not going to talk about this piece, but I'm going to let you have it here in your own, you know, in your visual sight, in your periphery, and think of a question.
My name is Stephen Robert Johns, and I'm a painter. This painting is titled Squares, Blue to White to Brown, and I did it in 1975. And it's part of a series of work I did. I studied at Chenard and Cal Arts, and for my senior year I did studio study, and this was part of a series that I did in 1975, but started in 72 during that time period at Cal Arts. And I did about 10 paintings like this, and I was exploring color shade, transition of color into color. Being a Southern California guy, surfer, and just love the beach and the ocean, I was trying to formalize a feeling of color transition from water and sky to the mountains. And so basically that's it. And I tried to do that with all my work. And it's acrylic, it's brushed on, and I love the hands-on brushing with a 2-3 inch brush and creating as even an application of paint as I can. And from this developed more and more hard edge, and I exhausted myself doing maybe 100 paintings like this in the square series, went to the circle series, and then eventually the triangles, and studied like this, doing my work in the studio for about 20 years. And then I was given an opportunity to do my work in Costa Rica at an art con. So I begrudgingly went. I just didn't really want to go, but I left, and I was really thankful I did, because while I was in the airplane, I looked down and saw this incredible landscape of topography that became my new muse, instead of just geometry. But I wanted to continue using tape, like I do here, hard edge, and even maybe color gradations. And so now my work has made almost a full transition into subject matter, but reduced and minimalized. So that's my work.
I'm Ruth Pastine, and my work has been focused on color and the phenomenology of color. Since I was in high school, I found the thesis for my work, which was really experiencing color through the painting itself. And the work has, although born and raised in New York City, I've been focused on my mature work since that time, since entering to Cooper Union and then going on to Hunter College. And through painting, all my work is oil on canvas, hand painted, or oil on paper. I'm really exploring these color relationships and the unknown through color, the adventure of finding the nuances of space and light through color relationships and proportions within the paintings themselves. Working serially is extremely important to my process, although each painting is unique. There's an umbrella structure that usually defines a body of work. For this painting, the Blue series, it's an ongoing series which is now retitled the Blue Light series. But each painting within that series is quite unique, even though the fundamental of it is the primary blue-orange color system. And I focus the majority of my work on the refinement of the three complementary color systems. So working from this very refined place of blue, orange, red, green, and yellow, violet. Those are sort of the fundamental groundwork of, and a springboard from where I take off. I really love that idea philosophically of having these refined parameters that seem like they're finite, but actually I explore limitless potential. And for me, the awe is really tightening the restrictions so that I push myself to discover within the studio, within the painting process itself, things within those finite means, new opportunities. So although there might be hundreds of blue paintings, no one replicates the other, and the color system itself has quite unique nuances. There's also new structural developments that happen, and so in this particular series, the Interplay series, I'm beginning to heighten light and spatial relationships through color, through value, which led to more heightened banding in later series of paintings. And I focus my work on the vertical here, or the horizontal, or the square. So those are also finite and refined structures, but from there it leads to many paintings within each series, and then there's always something that happens. You have to be available in the moment of painting to see the door and the closure to one body of work, and how the opportunity to define and seek a new body of work presents itself. But all my paintings are hand painted, layered over many, many weeks to months, depending. And they're found very organically. So my intentions are balanced with explorations that reveal themselves to me in time. And that's when I know each painting is finished. It's when my intentions coalesce with the exploration itself, and they seem to present and resolve. So all those unique brushstrokes actually become a greater continuum within the canvas itself. And this particular painting is a real favorite of mine. I'm most grateful to Billie for selecting it and including it in the Frederick Weisman Foundation collection. It's really a hallmark piece, and I think represents my blue series really well. And so very proud to have it in this show with the other artists, and grateful to Billie and Mika for the curation.
You know, for me, I started painting in circles when I was in high school. And I don't know why I started painting them. I exacted some comfort from doing it. And, you know, now I'm old, I'm still doing it. I've had comfort from doing it. So I don't know what to say about it other than Ruth said something interesting to me about chance and being available to chance. And chance is probably one of those things that reminds you you're alive. You know, when you're jumping, it's kind of exciting. You hope that you don't fall. And so it's been one journey of jumping and not falling. That's sort of what I do. And another thing is I don't think about paintings in terms of good paintings or bad paintings. I just think of them if they're true or they're false. If they're false, that's a bummer. But, you know, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I don't know what to say. This is just what I am, what I do. This is what I do. This is what I do. It's like asking, you know, I don't have a lot of art talk to say about this. It's sort of like, I think it's sort of like neural self-portraits, you know, and they're mutating and changing from moment to moment, and it's pretty interesting. I can remember I was painting a large circle when George Bush was looking for weapons of mass destruction. I was listening to NPR, like addicted to NPR, and because the palette is evolving emotionally and psychologically, I realized if I didn't turn off NPR, I'd have a 10-foot black dot. So I'm careful about what I take in, you know. It's because we're kind of like, we're these people that are jinxed with awareness. So, you know, it's all happening, and we're just mirroring. And that's from my perspective. And that, from my propaganda, is the truth. That's what I believe. I believe we're just kind of taking the temperature of the world and sharing our own self, kind of mixing those two. Anybody want to ask anything?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. And some of you were here last artist talk, so I really, really appreciate, you know, come here. But today we have a little bit different plans, so I think you're enjoying it. And then again, I really want to thank you, all these artists. And actually, I'm really sad today because, you know, after 2.5 months later, I have to bring the show down after this talk, right? So I hope you really enjoyed it. And then I'm just going to open the floor. So if you have any questions, just raise your hands. And here we are.
I'm going to put all of you on the spot. Gary, you have to talk more about your earlier paintings, how you arrived at the circle. Come on.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think at some point I might have put the brush down to clean it, and I went, that feels good, and I kept doing it. I started out making dots. I didn't know they were circles. So I was making dots when I was in high school. You know, I don't know. I think I'm just attracted to repetition. And so I think that there's something very satisfying about that. Repetition and mindlessness, hallmarks for my success. But I have other things that I do.
Put the circle with me.
For instance.
Well, the circle
question.
came off.
Can I ask you a question? I want to ask Gary a question. It's easy. You know the answer. I'm fascinated by your painting. I think your painting is amazing. I love looking at your painting. I like going up on it and seeing it like full on and then in my periphery. And I wanted to know your deliberateness on making dimensional imagery.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you asked that because I'm so not deliberate. What I'm deliberate about is honoring chance, and so these spatial things that happen, which are really surprising to me, happen by chance. I'm chasing one pattern at a time, and then I kind of juxtapose things. I was told not to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I had an artist, I'm not going to mention his name, come to my studio one time, and he said, you know, you're coloristically irresponsible. He says, your paintings are like train wrecks. You want to look away, but you can't take your eyes off of them. You know, it's John Millay. In any case, but I think the idea is if you can remain open, things happen that you can't control and that you can learn from.
Are you led?
Led?
Are you led by, you make a mark and then you're led someplace?
Well, you know, I mean, I make a mark and then I work with that. You know, it's kind of like jazz, you know, it's kind of like call and response. And then you go home, you come back and something else happens or, you know, these turn of events. And I don't do drawings or preliminary work. I try to avoid thinking. And
Can I make a comment? You know, whether it's a napkin drawing or a mark on a accidental mark, a lot of the times that gets me going in a direction that becomes a series of paintings. Chance. Yeah. So I'm 100% behind you on that. Yeah. And then I had one question about your painting. That black field of those circles, that is mesmerizing to me. It's like the Star Trek going into the next dimension, you know?
yeah, you know, it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, always loved Gary's paintings. The bigger they get, the more I like them too. I gotta say, he does some gigantic circles. And the one thing that makes them different from a lot of historical hard edge painting for me is that you get these vibrational qualities where it's a pulsation of light. And however you manage to do that, chance, circumstance, whatever, it really has an effect and it's hypnotic to look at them. So that's what I've always been after too. Something that when you look at it, it kind of hypnotizes you and takes you into a lot of different spaces in your mind. So I really love looking at it.
Thank you for saying that. And you know, one of the things that is important, imperative, is to energize the object, because ultimately you want to have an icon on the wall that's energized. It's almost like giving life to an object. No, that's what we do. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So you take an object and you fill it with life.
In terms of energizing, I think of my work, and one art writer in San Francisco wrote that the paintings are like time capsules, and they are sort of markers of that historical time for the artist in the process of making. Although I might start out with an idea of a blue focus painting, it's really that adventure through the unknown, through building up the surface of the canvas, that exploration itself is so much a part of the energized surface that I feel the viewer is also partaking in that dialogue of creation. and they seem to, I think quite a few of us, there's a resonant factor of many of us on this panel's work where they're almost like tuning forks. Although I mentioned the Blue series is ongoing, no two are alike, and each one has its own timbre, its own sound, its own resonant factor. And I think that vibration, the vibration is not only optical, but visceral. And for me, I think it's also the on-ramp to a philosophical inquiry that's quite important in terms of presence and the spatial openness of the adventure of the process itself.
The two things that I would like to inquire about in your painting, you said you paint all of the surfaces by hand, you're not spray painting. That I think is incredible, to be able to achieve that surface. The other thing is the type of the blue-orange. How do you get the orange in there? I don't understand.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled that you asked, Billie. All the blue, primary Blue series paintings, they're not going to black. All the blue paintings are augmented by ratios of their complement, which is orange. And so although they might appear to go darker, the value is going deeper, but they're actually getting warmer at those cusps. And I'm bringing the orange in, not necessarily throughout the entirety of the painting, but in certain admixtures. And that's how I sort of, like a chemist, adjust the ratios and also the luminosity. It's sort of like dialing it in with augmenting the primaries, the reds or the blues or the yellows with their complement. And for me, it's what gets me up and gets me into the studio every morning. It's that not only mixing on the palette, but then the application of, with a wet brush, of applying it on the surface itself. So some of the color mixing is happening on the palette, and then a lot of it is happening on the surface very spontaneously, which is where the adventure comes through the unknown, and that's really the access to finding new work.
Can I say one quick thing about, you asked me about early paintings, and I was thinking about the paintings that I used to do in the 80s. And I was doing paintings that look a lot like collages, because I would tear paper up, and just, I was just trying to finesse an energetic surface. And during that time, it's kind of was like juggling patterns, juggling patterns. And ultimately, you grow up and you realize you don't want to say everything. You just want to say one thing true. And so that's how I kind of arrived at something more simple.
I have a question to Andy, because a lot of us, we saw like a bigger scale of your work. So every single person coming to see that small piece of your work, they were just, it's like, I never seen anything like this, right? So can you just tell our audience about your small paintings a little bit more?
The very small.
Yeah, I think it was in 2009, whenever the economy crashed, I bought a whole bunch of just like 2 months before, I bought a ton of this color shifting paint, which was really, really expensive. And then the economy crashed, and then I had it to work with. I had a limited amount, so I knew I had to make small paintings with it. But it's this paint, I think it'd be about $4,000 a gallon. And I'm pouring the paint. It's meant to be sprayed, so you use just very little, but I was using sort of massive quantities of this paint and working with it the way I work with my acrylic. It's actually an automotive paint. And I somehow managed to get it to flow and to separate and to create these patterns and to do all the things that it took many years to get the acrylic paint to do. So it turned out great. I only made 6 or 7 paintings, about the size of the one that's in the show. It's just before you go into the room where my large painting and the surfboard is. There's a little painting. It's about 1 foot tall and about 6 inches wide. And if you walk from left to right, you'll see purple and green from one side and then gold and red or blue from the other side. It's pretty dramatic. And I do want to eventually make really large ones, but it's super expensive and it just about kills you when you breathe it in. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but stay tuned. I'll make some very large ones eventually. I think this was Chrome Illusion. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the process of making all the paintings is similar. It's finding ways to layer the paint into containers with all different colors, and then depending on which direction I pour it, up and down, left, right, in a swirling pattern, I can really get it to do a lot of different things. And then I shift the surface around and get it to do more things until there's just that moment where it's like, all right, that's it. Magic, hopefully. And then I'm done. But yeah, I think all of us, Ruth was talking about it before. I think you want to take physical things and then turn them into something that for that moment, when you look at it, you're just mesmerized by it. And it can take you in a lot of different directions. But I want to be floored and mesmerized and go to an amazing space. And when I see that, when I'm working, I know it's done. And then I walk away and hopefully it lives up to what I was seeing when I put it on the wall. But it's rewarding when it happens.
And while you're working, do you feel that time just disappears?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
Most of the artists I know, including myself, it's like we get lost in the fabric of the canvas or the sculpture or whatever, and the next thing you know, 4 hours have gone by and we're 7.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah, it's an adventure and you lose your sense of time. And I mean, that's why we do it, I think, to get lost making it. And then hopefully people like it and we can make the next one. So that's what it's all about for me.
One thing about what you said, Billie, I don't think many people know that my paintings are all hand painted. They look like they're very delicately painted, but I start very raw and very open and very loose. And the approach, if you saw my painting wall, it's completely splattered because it's the coalescing of all the brushstrokes that lead to the refinement, layer upon layer upon layer. But they're really, they're very muscularly painted, and they're quite rigorous. So the larger they get, the more physical demanding they are. But it's quite cathartic, and I do love that process.
Maybe part of what attracts us all to the creative process, that it is withdrawing from reason and embracing discovery. And in doing that, what are you talking about?
No. Finish it.
I'm done.
No, because we are like, we have a limited time, and then these artists are having so much fun, and it's fun to hear about it. But I want to give some opportunity to the audience because we only have like about 10 minutes left. So is there any question? Yeah. The Marian?
I guess my question is for you, Mika and Billie. One of the things that you kind of feel walking around is that the only thing that's really connecting all of the work is the sense of space, whether it's like the literal cutting of the space. I guess the one unifying element for me walking around was the element of space. Could you talk about how you made selections? And is that just something that you've been attracted to as a collector, the feeling of space or formlessness? Or is it something that just came about that as you were selecting?
I'll let Billie answer that.
Well, when I put together exhibitions, I say you can kill a piece if you put it in the wrong location. You have to have pieces that speak to each other. And you can, even when I go to buy pieces of art, if it doesn't work with the other part of the collection, I can't do that to it. It's not fair. But I think Peter Frank stated it more beautifully than anybody about how the pieces talk to each other.
In this exhibition,
Yeah.
yes, that you probably noticed or noticed without noticing that each room has a certain color quality to it. It doesn't, not a color, not a quality, a color quality. You can call the back room the blue room, but with so many exceptions that you realize it's not really a blue room, it's a bluish room. But in that ish is the whole dialogue among all this artwork, because all the works in that room are talking to one another. Meanwhile, that room is talking to the next room over, and the whole situation of the relationship between the works themselves, the relationship to them and their space, the relationship to them and you as you enter and as you leave the space. Your sense of more than optical, somatic, haptic relationships and effects happen, so that no matter how 2 or 3 dimensional the work is, how color or colorless the work is, it's affecting you. It's impacting on your perception. I was thinking even Guy's work, which is in many ways classic cubist or constructivist 3D composition, is turning you at various angles and opening up whole new aspects of information and experience as soon as you move not even 90 degrees. So that was probably also done intuitively, but after years of doing it intuitively.
So I just wanted to say one more thing. Peter Frank did the introduction to the catalog that Mika so nicely put together. And it's been such a pleasure working with Mika. We hope to continue to do more and more.
I just want to add to that question about space. And 5 years ago, I became a gallery director here. And one of the big attraction was the space, because it's not a rectangular box. And then I'm not against the rectangular box. Sometimes the rectangular box works better for certain work. But this gallery can create so many different stories. And then especially working with Billie, it really taught me a lot, because first show we did it together a few years ago about pop art. And first, when the work came in, I was so overwhelmed because it was 98 pieces. And even though we really studied the dimensions of the space and every corner of it and, like every inch of it, but how are we going to put all this together? But the way she laid it out and then moved things around, and then she gave me certain freedom to express, certain things. And it's just amazing to see in the end, everything comes together. And then again, this show, the Peter was talking about color quality, but it's like a beyond color. Like every room you goes in, you get like a different feelings and different kind of like the stories you can create. So it's been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, Mika, I'm so glad you were involved in this. I'm sure you had a lot to do with it too. I've been in about 20 plus shows that Billie's done. And I have to say, I think she's my favorite curator in the world, because she puts together things and creates dialogues between pieces in ways that you really don't see it. Usually when you go to a museum show, it's trying to tell you something literal or historical about the work, and it's interesting, but Billie creates true dialogue between the work, and it works so much stronger when you walk into a show that she's curated. You're seeing things in new ways, and you're making discoveries in new ways that you just really don't see it very often. So again, congrats on another fantastic show, Billie, and keep doing what you're doing.
You know, if I could say a word about, it takes a certain kind of talent to install a show, because as much as Peter's talking about the work and how it feels a particular way in a particular room, there's so many ways to go about putting an exhibition together, which is as important as the works, each individual work. Robert Irwin came into a gallery when I was installing a show once, and all the work was taken off the truck, it was put in the space and is sitting around there, and I go, what do I do? How do you do this? You know, I think I was 27 at the time. And he said, well, arrange all the work. Don't think about it. Just put some light on it, put the work in and make sure it's all kind of where it could be, then leave. And come back after lunch or come back tomorrow and look at it and go, now what's wrong with this picture? And then you go to work. It's a science, it's an art, and it's a talent. So congratulations.
I have to say that I think my style of hanging has to do with our foundation in Los Angeles. If some of you have been there, you know. It's a very eclectic hanging. And we used to do these midnight capers and move the art around. And after doing that for, 10 years, you kind of get the hang of it. But even before that, when I was working with the LA County Museum, I was about 1 week out of every month traveling with an international exhibition and installing artwork. And they weren't my shows at the time. I was the conservator on it. So I think without realizing it, you pick up something that works for you. But Fred taught me a lot about the eclectic hanging. So, but anyway, I wanted to ask a couple things. One of the things that's great about our California LA artists is that they communicate. And I love the cute stories. I don't know how many of you were here last time, but Ned Evans told a lot of the stories about the local artists together. But you, Stephen, have a story about Ed Moses being your neighbor. And Andy has stories about Ed being his dad. And, and I mean, all of these great stories, I think, are part of your creation, too.
I remember Ed came to the studio one time in Ojai. I think you were with him, Andy. Ed came and we were drinking champagne. And when he left, he had my champagne glass in his hand as he got into the car. And I said, hey, glass stays with me. But he gave it no thought at all. He was headed out with my glass. Ned Moses.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time we have here. I thought a few more minutes.
The other thing I wanted to hear about from you is telling people about how you work in these vernacular spaces. It's almost like a surgical space, tented with plastic.
Yeah, I actually work inside of tents that are inside of my studio. And I have a lot of barriers before you even get into the room, plastic. And one fly basically kills about 2 weeks of work because it's several weeks to create all these different buckets of paint that I make. And then I bring them into a space. I actually drive them. I have one space around the corner. So I make all the mixtures there. And then I put them in a van on the floor. And we drive them around the corner, going really, really, really slow, waving every car past. Then we unload all the buckets, arrange them around these tables. I work on a table inside of a tent. And it's a couple weeks to make the mixtures. It's 1 day to make the painting. And it's about 5 to 14 days for the painting to dry. So no tiny bug can get in for those 14 days. And they unfortunately have gotten in before, and they've always done a good job ruining the painting. I'm open. If they can improve the painting, I'm open, but they never have. One, I did sort of paint an airplane on top of it because it made this sort of loop-the-loop, and it turned out pretty good. That's one in 100. So. All right, yeah. Steve and I were next door neighbors when in the 70s, early 70s. So
I was just graduating from Cal Arts, and I knew Ed was an artist. I didn't know him, and I knew Andy was a
good basketball player, so we'd play basketball. But I decided to make my own stretcher bars for my graduation, this 6 foot by 6 foot. So I have 1x2s and I'm hammering them with regular carpentry nails. And I was having split wood and I was having trouble, and I was swearing, and I see this big bushy black hair look over the fence and it's Ed. And that's how close we were. And he says, "What's going on over here?" And I said, "I'm having trouble." He goes, "Just a minute." And he came over, he walked around the house, came over up the driveway, went into my garage, and he says, "Oh, you're making your own canvases, huh?" I said, "Yeah, I want it to be like all me." And he goes, "Well, here's Lucius Hudson's business card. You go to Lucius and he'll make you the best canvases you can make." And that's my story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like you to talk more about your cardboard models that you're not holding.
Two very separate things.
Just a few moments.
The cardboard models. I mean, working with cardboard, I actually first started with it. I lived in Venice since '69, and the UPS trucks would leave the back open. The big brown ones, they had no security then. They didn't care about it. So I had this supply of cardboard, endless, different size boxes. And the first show I did with them was at the Orange County. It was the La Jolla Museum, and it was all cardboard. And there were boxes that were on like slack wires and constructions that would be impossible with any other material except helium balloons. So I could tie them up with string and make just anything, any kind of construction that I wanted. And it was really fun because there was no end to it. My studio at the time was above the Townhouse Bar on Windward Avenue in Venice. And I was working with 2x4s before I found out about the UPS trucks. And I would make those kind of constructions and they'd fall and they make this big loud noise. And the owner of the bar, he came up and he said, "Look, you got to stop. You're really disturbing my patrons downstairs." And which was laughable because the patrons downstairs was one guy who was passed out and he'd wake up when this wood would drop on the floor. So I had to switch to cardboard, and that's how that started. But then it became, when Washington was doing the cardboards, I started using the cardboard for making it like kind of tougher constructions. I didn't lay glass into it, and I do different kinds of compositions with it, but I used the cardboard more as like wood. But it was easy and it was quick. I could use a razor blade. I didn't need any tools. There was no mess. And it was cheap as hell. It was free. It was interesting because they were Rauschenbergs. They were not cardboard. It had nothing to do with cardboard. It was like the street finding things. It was like all those street guys, Carl Andre, looking at the steel plates on the streets that covered up manhole covers, and let's see, Richard Serra was using lead, stuff like that. The Bears, we used to call them the Bears when I was in New York. These guys lived in these dark studios making these things out of street goods, and I felt like my work was so refined because Rauschenberg was just using these things that had been run over by trucks, but they were elegant and beautiful. And I wanted my work to be elegant and beautiful in a different way, but there was no matching it. And so I let the cardboard just be what it was. And eventually it became something else for me. It became a model making tool, which was quick and dirty because I could glue it together, cut it, and I could make volumes. To this day, like the last model I made of any scale was 16 feet in cardboard, and it was for a bronze that went out to Burbank. It's a public work out there, but I still have the model. And what I'd like to do is, maybe don't you have property in outside somewhere that I want to light them on fire and send them off into the heavens. But yeah, at night. Okay, that's actually a good idea, right? A beach caper. But and then my kids kept saying, Dad, why don't you do a cardboard show of the models you do? Because they're just like those. And I had an opportunity, thank you, Billie, at the Weisman Museum in Malibu. And Billie asked me to put in a piece, so I put in a 6-foot cardboard model, an exact model of a bronze piece. And from there, I started to look at them very differently. And the evolution of it was very much, your responsibility. So from now on, the Weisman Museum has first call for all the models, and we'll make sure before we set a match. Yeah.
Burning sculpture festival, because it's a week-long thing.
So we're going to spend another few minutes, and I'm going to ask Peter to final word for the show.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that the show itself is the final word. The show because it's that kind of show. It's a show that seeks first and foremost to present what it contains, not teach you about what it contains, but let you teach yourself. It's all about experience as opposed to knowledge, or even better, that the experience of this work is knowledge of it in this context. And that I'm also talking for the curation. The installation is it's not self-effacing, but it's not about itself. It's about waking the works up, as I said before, waking the works up to one another. Billie said that too. And waking you up to this waking up. It's, like getting up early one morning and listening to the birds talk to one another. Well, it's watching this work, not just looking at this work, but watching this work talk to one another, and envelop you in a range of experience that, because of the sensitive hanging, makes sense, doesn't skip a beat, doesn't contradict itself, goes back on itself only to keep you awake and to find new things in what we think we already saw. This is the second or third time I've seen this show, and there were things in it, relationships in it, that I not only didn't remember, but I didn't see the first time, which is the best way of not remembering. So my thanks and congratulations equally to Billie and Mika, and to all the artists in the show. We always have to thank the artists first and foremost for making this stuff in the first place. But to making this kind of work and this kind of dialogue is a little bit special, and I think it's something particular to art making in Southern California. This ongoing dialogue that depends on but transcends the academic context. We're a region of art schools, but we think in terms of art, not in terms of schools.
Thank you, Peter.
So here we are. Thank you so much. And I just want to make an announcement. We have another gallery on the campus. It's Lachman Gallery. And one of the artists in this show, Casper Brindle, has a solo show there. And I create the show. So if you have a moment before you leave, you can stop by because they're closing at 5 o'clock. Yeah. Thank you so much.
In a certain way, that's what extends that sense of relationship.
Mhm.
So,
And then last but not least, I really want to thank our gallery students. Without them, I cannot do the work here. And then Billie, thank you so much for the next one.
And thank you, Mika, and thank you, Cal State LA, and the students, and my staff too. Thank you.